process group. Appropriate tools and techniques you may utilize in performing these processes. And the interaction required between the processes, level of implementation, rigorous of implementation, all has to be tailor-made to suit your specific project, which is called tailoring concept. That means, based on the information contained in the project charter, by understanding the nature, size, and complexity of the project, you are coming up with a mind mapping like this, where you are documenting what all the processes from each process group we are going to utilize, what all the tools and techniques we may utilize, what is the interaction required between the processes to achieve the objectives of the project. That's all we can think at this stage. That's what we do in this process when you are doing first time, when you are starting the planning work. Yes. The strategy development, that's all. Correct. Yes. Correct. Complete. Correct. Correct. Then we go into detail. So first we need to think about our as a strategy first. That's all we can think, because you have only high level information only, right?
How you gonna plan, how you gonna execute, how you gonna handle?
How you are going to close? What techniques you use? That we may think about in this stage. In the resource management planning, we'll think about it. Okay. Clear? That's what we can do at this in this process when you are starting first time. We leave it there and then we continue the other processes. When we finalize all the plans, we come back to this process again. Finally, we will come back to this process again. We pull all the final plans and call it as project management plan. That is our comprehensive plan of action in managing this project. That's the way it happens. Okay, we will talk about it again at the end when we complete the planning processes. Now let's go to the next process. What's the next process? Plan scope management. Plan scope management. What do you mean by plan scope management? The result of this process is scope management plan. What is the result of this process? Scope management plan. What is scope management plan? Basically, you are thinking about what is your strategy and approach which you are going to use in managing the scope of the project. It is a strategic plan development. What does that mean? Are we able to straight away go into action? No. So we need to think, strategize, and then we move into action. Always remember, this is a good concept in project management. You as a project manager, don't jump into action. Always think, how are you going to plan? How are you going to execute? How are you going to control? How are you going to close? What tools and techniques we may use? What is the interaction required between the various actions in order to achieve the project work? All has to be thought of and documented. So we always say project manager must always think in advance. How will you plan? How will you execute? How will you control? How will you close? So here we are talking about thinking, planning for strategy of managing the scope, right? So we need to think about how are you going to collect the requirements? What are the tools and techniques you may use? We are basically thinking about what are the processes we have in the scope management. How are you going to define the scope of the project? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? How are you going to create the WBS? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? How are you going to validate the scope of the project? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? How are you going to control the scope of the project? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? You need to think. But remember, we don't have much information about the project yet. So it may not be possible for you to think about execution control now. You can only think of how are you going to plan first. So the management plan development is happening in 2 stages. First stage is thinking about how are you going to plan. You think about the planning processes. How are you going to collect the requirements? What are the tools and techniques you may use? How are you going to create the scope of the project? What are the tools and techniques you may use? How are you going to create the WBS? What are the tools and techniques you may use? Think only planning process. When we complete almost all the planning work, when we get the better understanding of the project, we come back to this process again. We will think about execution and control processes, not now. So there is a 2-stage thinking for the development of management plans. So what I said about concept is management plans, project managers must always think in advance. How are you going to plan? How are you going to execute? How are you going to close? What are the tools and techniques you may use? What is the interaction required between the various actions to achieve the project delivery? That's what we are thinking. So the result is scope management plan. Now you can see in each knowledge area, the first process is management plan development. In schedule management plan, plan schedule management plan. Plan cost management plan. Plan resource management plan. Plan quality management plan. Plan communications management. That's the result. Plan risk management plan. Plan procurement management plan. Plan stakeholder engagement plan. So in each knowledge area, the first process is your advanced thinking and development of the strategy before you jump into further action. Now always remember, this is good. Always remember, whatever we want to do, we will straight away jump into execution. No, you will think, strategize. Then you will develop the detailed plan. Then you jump into execution. And then you measure the performance. You control the performance, right? So see whether we are aligned with the plan. That is the same action. That's what we want you to do. So this characteristic, we need to develop. It is not currently available with you, I'm sure. We always straight away jump into action. No, that is not the good. So you need to think, strategize, document, so that you have the complete strategy and approach in your hand in managing the project. So that you will not face any difficulties in performing any of these processes, because you already thought about it, how it is going to be done, what techniques we need to use, what interaction required. You already thought about it. So you can be able to flow through these processes smoothly without any difficulties at all. Okay, that's what we want you to. Clear? This is a good concept in project management. See, when you say development of drawings will happen upon finalizing the requirements and the scope of work, and then design work will happen in parallel with the planning work. So it is actually this phase in industry is called planning and designing work. Planning and designing phase. Planning and designing phase. No, it's all planning only. Only planning. No, there is no execution work here. Because here the monitoring control work only. Certain area only you have the execution processes. Here there is no execution processes in these 2 knowledge area. The execution already happening through this process. You have 10 processes in the execution. Yeah.
Just to give the product, all these stages.
Yeah. You will have it, don't worry. Once you have this picture, then you will see When we go into detail, I will show you the sample also there in the presentation. Clear? Good. Now let's go to the understanding the next process. Online participants, any doubt? Now let's discuss about collect requirements. Collect requirements. What do you mean by collect requirements? This terminology tells me that I don't have any requirements in my hand as of now. Is it true? No. You have the high level requirement. You have the high level requirements in the project charter. Is it good enough for you to develop the detailed plans? So you need, what do you need? You need detailed requirements. We need detailed requirements in a quantified manner. Then only we can able to create plans for meeting all those requirements. So here what are you doing? We are collecting the detailed requirements. What are the requirements we need to collect? Firstly, we need to understand what is the product they want. They must define the product, right? Size, shape, functionality, performance of the product has to be defined first, which is called product requirements. So this is a detailed write up. What they want, they need to write up. This is called product requirement. We sit with the stakeholders and do the workshops in order to understand their requirements, functionality, performance aspect, everything we will discuss and document it. It's called product requirements. Then we need to understand what methodology we need to use, what technology do we use, what are the standards, processes, procedures we need to apply in achieving the product requirements, which is called, yes, they may say, or you may need to decide, but the technical consultant will decide what standard to use, what methodology to use. All has to be discussed and documented. So, which is called the project requirements. We can say product requirements, project requirements, technical requirements, quality requirements, test requirements, verification requirements, acceptance requirements, handing over requirements, maintenance requirements. We can keep expanding this list. So we are maintenance requirement also there, maintenance requirement. So we are collecting the detailed requirements from the stakeholders in a quantified manner and documenting in this process. So the result of this process is requirements documentation. Requirements documentation, which is detailed requirements of product requirement, project requirements, technical requirements, quality requirements, test requirements, verification requirements, handing over requirements, acceptance requirements, maintenance requirements, functional requirements, business requirements. We can keep expanding this. Yeah, your doubt. So requirement documentation is the first result. But the second result from this process is called requirements traceability matrix. What's the second result? Requirements traceability matrix. Requirements traceability matrix. What is my requirement traceability matrix? When you are collecting the requirement, product requirement, project requirement, technical requirements, and so on, is it going to be defined by a single stakeholder? No. Even within the product requirements, some of the stakeholders are responsible for defining the product with respect to the size and shape. Some stakeholders are responsible for defining the functional requirement. Some are responsible for defining the our performance requirement. Some are responsible for defining the technical requirement. Some are responsible for defining the methodology. Some are responsible for defining the technology, standards, procedures. There are multi-stakeholders involved in defining the requirements of the stakeholders. Correct or not? How we are going to keep track of these stakeholders and their requirements? What does that mean? We have a responsibility after the collection of requirements. What we have a responsibility. What is our responsibility? We need to create the plan for achieving all these requirements during the planning. We need to consider all these requirements while you are creating the plans. Right? During execution, you have to ensure that all these requirements are being achieved and the deliverables are being produced. During monitoring control, you need to measure the performance of achieving the deliverables. If you are not aligned with the plan, you need to come up with an action for improving the performance. Until the closer, where you are demonstrating that you have completed the project deliverable successfully by meeting all the requirements of the stakeholders. So you have a responsibility for managing the requirements from the collection of requirements all the way until the closer. How we are going to manage? For example, in order to make it clear for you with an example. Say, for example, you collected the requirements. Based on the requirements, you came up with a plan. You didn't produce the requirement traceability matrix. Assuming you didn't produce the requirement traceability matrix. You came up with a plan, you finalize the plan, you move to the execution. When you are executing the work, when you are producing a particular deliverable, you are facing a difficulty. You are not able to meet certain requirements of the stakeholders due to methodology problem or technology problem during the execution stage. How will you solve this problem? You are not able to meet certain requirements defined in the requirement documentation. How will you solve it? We all sit down together and cry. The problem will be solved, right? What do you do? Definitely you will sit with the team, trying to understand why we are not able to achieve these requirements due to methodology, technology, process interaction, or sequencing, or many reasons we may come up with. We may come up with many solutions to achieve the requirements. But you will not be able to, yeah.
Equipment, material, timing, schedule, each field, and that's why you have to be reporting about it.
Correct. You have all the plans to achieve this. But when you are executing the plan, you are facing a problem. You are facing a problem, right? What will you do? What will you do? Definitely, you will discuss with the team, you come up with the various solutions, right, to solve this problem. But remember, you will not be able to reach a conclusion unless you involve the stakeholder who provided you requirements related to this deliverable. You will not be able to come to a conclusion of your solution unless you involve the stakeholder who provided the requirements related to this deliverable. So how will you find this stakeholder now? How will you find the stakeholder? You didn't create the register. Which register you say? Which register? Stakeholder register. Stakeholder gives you information about all the stakeholders. But how you know? Requirement? Requirements register. We don't have requirement register. Traceability matters. Yes. Sign up from them. Yes, yes. Requirements. Correct.
In case, so the management is not taking responsibility for the some issues with the time.
Joy management. At the end of the day, whatever the problem we face, we need to solve it to achieve the requirements of the stakeholders. This is our duty. Yeah.
We'll go back to this point.
Yeah. Now the question is, I'm trying to explain to you what is the importance of the requirement traceability matrix. Where you collected the requirements, you have the responsibility to manage all the requirements throughout the project life cycle. Where if you create the requirement traceability matrix, it will help you in managing the requirements. by engaging the stakeholders whenever you face problems. But you don't have the requirement traceability matrix currently because you didn't create it. So you move to the execution after finalizing the plan. When you are executing the work, you are facing a problem. You are definitely sitting with the team and coming up with a solution. You are trying to solve the problem. But I'm telling you that you will not be able to solve the problem until you involve the stakeholder who provided you the requirements related to this deliverable. How will you find who is the stakeholder related to this deliverable? So what do you need to do? We need to go back to the planning documents. We dig out all the planning documents and we see how many workshops conducted related to this deliverable, collection work requirements workshop. And then we need to find out who are the stakeholders attend the workshop, who provided this requirement. And then we pull them to the meeting. We discuss about the problem we are facing in achieving your requirement because they know the product very well. Remember that. They know the product very well. They know what is the requirement, what kind of problem we may face, what is the best methodology, technology available in achieving this deliverable. They know very well. You must treat them as experts. So when you are discussing with them, this problem we are facing, then they can tell you, this is the best solution you can use in terms of managing this problem. So you can easily solve the problem. And then you can able to complete the deliverable by achieving the requirements. And there is a sample for you. No. Yes. What they do, when you are collecting the requirements itself, as I told you, some requirements are given by, say, product requirements. Some are responsible for defining the product. Say so and say stakeholder 1. Stakeholder 2 are responsible for defining the functionalities. Stakeholder 3 is responsible for defining the performance. And methodology technology by technical consultant. That's one of the stakeholders. There are many parties involved. So when we collect the requirements itself, we are putting the link. Who are the stakeholders were involved? And what is this requirements related to? Is it related to product objective or schedule objective or cost objective or quality objective? We are linking the stakeholders of the requirement they provided in the requirement traceability matrix. So we have the complete clear mechanism in our hand throughout the project life cycle in managing these requirements. So which makes our life easier. During execution, whenever we face the problem, we know who are the stakeholders involved. We quickly call them into the meeting, discuss about the problem, come up with a solution, move on with the execution so that we will be able to produce the deliverables by meeting the requirements fully. So it makes your life easier. But if you don't create in the planning, not organize yourself, you are going to face problem in the execution stage. Then it's not the good way of management. That's why they created this result, which is requirements traceability matrix. Clear? This is to give you the idea. What does that mean? Why this guy always going, coming? So what are the results from this? One is the requirement documentation. Second one is the requirement traceability matrix. Very good. Now let's go to the next process. What's the next process? Defined scope. What do I mean defined scope? Which is basically scope of work, right? But the real project management terminology is called project scope statement. That's the result of this process. Project scope statement. But generally we call it as scope of work. Okay? What is scope of work? You are all definitely involved in some way in managing the scope of work in the project, right? You are going through the scope of work on a daily basis. Tell me, what is the structure of the scope of work? What are the key items defined within the scope of work? Can you tell me? Just recall and tell me. No, not coming out. Correct. But it is coming from God or what? You have to develop it as part of the planning. Then only you can give to the contractor. So during the planning stage, project management team is developing the scope of work. So during the, what happened? Why your question is correct? Because you are starting to involve in the project only during the execution stage as a contractor. So when you are coming into the tender, already we give you the detailed scope of work as part of the tender. Whereas how it was developed? It was developed by the project management team. Where that says project management team, key stakeholders, technical consultants involved in the development of the scope of work. So majority of the planning work has already been completed by the project management team or project manager. Then when you are coming into tendering stage, use the detailed scope of work, you are proposing submitting the tender. I am analyzing, appointing you. Then use the scope of work, you are developing a detailed plan. It's a two-stage development of them. But project manager development is not detailed plan. It is a high-level plan. We call it as master plan. Right? Whereas contractual development is the detailed plan. Now come to the point. Scope of work. It is applicable to all industry. Here we don't talk about any industry, construction industry, IT industry, or any other industry. This is principle, nothing to do with the technical. It is only a management principles. It's applicable for all industry in the same manner. Okay, I'm going to explain what is scope now. That's when we go into the detailed discussion, you will have the samples also in the presentation. Scope of work. Okay, I will tell you what is that scope of work. Generally, when you are going through the scope of work, what is the structure of the scope of work? Generally, it starts with the executive summary of the scope of work, high-level description of the scope of work, and then they talk about the product, and they talk about the methodology, technology, standard, processes, procedure they use, and then talk about technical aspects, and then they talk about quality aspects, and then they talk about test requirements, and then they talk about acceptance criteria. On what basis they are going to accept the deliverables completed using this scope of work. And then they talk about maintenance aspect. Then finally, you can see one statement: project exclusions. Project exclusions. Have you seen this anywhere? No. So what are we trying to do? No, BOQ is further development. That's quantity approach. Based on the scope of work, they develop the BOQ, describing the scope and the quantity of items to be done. And then you pricing for it. Like your specification.
Yes.
Like our specification.
But not in details.
And the specifications are more details. Specifications are more details. Scope of work is not that much detail. So it's always link the scope of work with the specification. You must read in conjunction. Yes. But generally, when you see scope of work, this is the structure. They talk about product, they talk about methodology, technology, talk about technical aspect, talk about quality aspect, talk about acceptance, test and acceptance aspect, and then finally they talk about maintenance aspect. Then finally you can see one statement: project exclusions. What does that mean? You are trying to, what we did here, we have, so when we say collect requirements, the two major requirements are, one is the product requirement, other one is project requirements. The product requirements defines the functions and features of the product, whereas project requirements defines the methodology, technology, standard, processes, procedure, which you are going to use in creating the product. If these two are integrated together, then it is a scope of work. So, which is basically integration of product requirements and project requirements in an integrated manner in order to understand what is included in this project, what is not included in this project. You can do a lot of things. Do you think everything is being done in each project? There are a lot of things available. So you must define clearly what is included in this project, what is not included in this project. such a level of clear definement must be available in order to say the scope of work is good scope of work, or clear scope of work, or well-defined scope of work. If the scope of work is not well-defined, clear in this manner, what will happen? You create the scope of work. There are a lot of ambiguities are there, but still you came up with a plan, you move to execution. When you are executing the work, you produce the deliverable, you call the stakeholders, come for verification. They come for verification, they say, this is not the deliverable we have expected. So they reject the deliverable. Yeah. Which
Source, like for the
material you mean?
they can take it all already. They're
Suppose-
supposed to use someone who is
Yes.
expected.
What they are expecting, what deliverable they are expecting, what technical methods they are expecting, everything they will be defining in detail.
From where to source it? It's where?
Source, they may have a list of sources. Not at this stage, in this stage they will include, but further when they develop the, like a bill of quantity, they will give the list of potential suppliers who can provide such. During the contract tendering stage, they will add this. Sometimes they may use within the specification itself, they may say the list of potential suppliers, good quality suppliers available, they may say that. Potential vendors, they define within the specification.
There was scope of work. Because there is that cover. So there they will describe for you all the actually what is the parts, what are the parts.
Basically, inclusion, exclusion. That's all. That's the way it's described.
There are each one you will go for detail what is the expected to be the surface, the area for it.
Correct.
And they will go for each system. They will
Yes.
describe the electrics,
Yes. That level of details must be available in this. What is included, what is not included. Inclusion, exclusion must be there.
Now, information related to the specification and to the standards, all in different documents.
Correct. They may have more details on the technical aspects in these specifications. So always you see scope of work and the technical specification must read in conjunction together. This is mainly stakeholders' requirements defined in integrated manner. The technical part of it details methodology, technology, material use, system use, how to be executed, all will be part of the specification. It should be always read in practicality. Yes. Okay. That's what we are trying to achieve through this process. So the result is final scope of work. The result is project scope statement. What's that? Project scope statement. That is the result of this process. That means we have already went through with the stakeholders multiple round. They agreed and signed up the scope of work. But whenever I use project scope statement, it gives me two important message. It gives me two important message. What is that two important message? Number one, it tells you that we have the final scope of work in our hand. That's what it means. Whenever I use the terminology, project scope statement, it tells me that we have the final scope of work signed up by the stakeholders. This is what we want. Number two, it indicates to you that we are ready to start the planning work. We are ready to start the planning work. Meaning, your real planning work only starts upon completion of this process. So up to now, from here until now, our focus is in getting the scope finalized with the stakeholders by collecting the detailed requirements and integrating them in the scope and review with them and getting their sign up to say it is final before we start our planning work. So the real planning work only starts upon completion of this process. Clear? This is the two message we are getting. Okay, let's take a break and then we talk about why Vikrama Pandian, why you are going out, coming back? What is happening with you? I think internet not stable with you, I think, today. Okay, let's take 10-minute break. Back. Are you all back? Okay, let's go to the next step. Create WBS. Create WBS. Create WBS. Okay. What is WBS? Work breakdown structure. Tell me, explain what you know about WBS. Stage wise? Okay. What about stage wise? Design. Okay. That is phases. List out the activities. Activities to the next level. Sound? Sound is fine. You join. Okay. No, you can hear now. Create WBS. What is WBS? Work breakdown structure. I'll give a small example to understand WBS. When you complete the defined scope process, you as a project manager, basically your table is full. What is there? Your multiple volume of collector requirements documentation is there. Scope of work, multiple volume, architectural scope of work, mechanical scope of work, electrical scope of work, and so on. So your table is basically full. So what is your next duty? What is your next duty? Okay, you have the scope of work in your hand, in your table now. What is your next duty? You need to come up with a plan for achieving this scope of work. Right? So all the plans created for what? Achieving the scope of work defined in the defined scope process. This is basically integration of requirements. That's what we did, right? So what are you going to do? You are going to read each and every line of scope of work and come up with a plan. When it will, how long it will take to do that. And also your planning may not be effective. So in order to make your life easier, why we need to keep the scope of work in detail? Why not we break down the scope of work into the deliverables we are going to produce from this scope of work? So you are breaking down the scope of work into deliverables from higher order all the way until we reach to the point where the deliverable is smaller in size. When the deliverable is smaller in size, easy for you to plan, execute, control, and deliver to the stakeholder. So WBS is nothing but breaking the scope of work into deliverable-oriented components from higher, bigger size all the way to the smallest size of deliverable. Say, for example, let's take a easily understandable project like building project. You can break down the building project scope into substructure, which is below the ground, superstructure above the ground, architectural work, mechanical work, electric work, IT work, and so on. So when I say substructure is still bigger for me. I may break down into basement 1, basement 2, basement 3. Still bigger for me. I may break down into architecture, foundation work, architectural work, mechanical work, electrical work, until I reach the smallest size. What is the smallest size in the WBS? Is a work package. When you use the terminology work package, meaning the deliverable is smallest in size. So the lowest level in the WBS is called work package. So when you look at the WBS, anybody seen the WBS or no? No. Then I need to open that another slide for you. This is the WBS. So what we are doing here, we are breaking the project scope into deliverable oriented components. These are the highest level. Highest level always faces sub-projects, major deliverables are on the highest level. And then we break down until we reach to the work package. So work package is the smallest size deliverable. So what we can realize from this scope of work, instead of reading the whole scope of work and trying to create the plan, if you look at it, we can able to realize what all the deliverables we are going to produce from the scope of work. So we can able to visualize the entire project. We can able to visualize the entire project and the deliverable which you are going to produce from the scope of work what we have in our hand. When the team look at it now, what they will say? Of course, you are not going to do the WBS. The team is going to do it, but you know what to do, how to do, what techniques to use. You are leading them in creating this WBS. The team is the one creating it. In fact, all the planning work, you are not doing it. You are a leader. You know what to do, how to do, what techniques to use. You are leading the project team in performing the planning work. Okay, so don't think that we are doing everything. But of course, you know, that's why you are project manager. You know what to do, how to do, when to do, what techniques to use, so you can guide the team. Right? Yeah. Work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure. So I give you another one. Say aircraft system. I can able to break down like this. I have a lot of example, I think. Software product, I can able to break down like this. I can break down into project management deliverable, product requirement deliverable, detailed design deliverable, construct deliverables, integration test deliverables. I can able to break down like this. The scope of work can be break down like this. So what is the importance of the WBS? That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Here, one of the biggest difficulty for us, we are not able to understand the project. Then how are you going to come up with a plan? So the WBS helps you in understanding the entire scope of work, the deliverables which you are going to produce, which makes your life easier in planning and managing the project. That's all. So when the stakeholder look at it, the WBS, they can able to confirm, yes, this is what we want. This is another reason. No, not to that level. So only deliverables. What deliverables? Only deliverables which we are going to get from the scope of work. Of course, you go into detail, material planning, all these things is part of the resource estimation. After scope of work, the next step of planning work is creation of WPS. Deliverables, not delivery. Deliverables. That means products. Just a product or deliverables. These are the deliverables. Right? So here we can able to visualize the entire project. Once you visualize the entire project, your planning effort become easier. Your management will become. If you don't understand the project, then everything is difficult. Correct? No, not at this stage. Of course, based on this, we are going to estimate resources, materials, equipment. All the deliverables. Yes. No, schedule for the detailed development. We'll talk about it, don't worry. So, whenever I say create WBS, you are breaking the scope of work into deliverable-oriented components from biggest size to the smallest deliverable in order to visualize the entire project and make our life easier in planning and managing the project. That's all. The next is, where is the next? Annotate. I can use this annotate or different annotate. Okay. Yes. This is what is the next? Schedule management. What is the result of this process? Now you should be able to say. Schedule management plan. What is schedule management plan? You as a project manager thinking in advance, how are you going to plan and manage the timeline requirement of the project? Where you are thinking about? How are you going to define the project activities? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? How are you going to determine the sequencing of project activities? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? How are you going to determine the duration of each activity? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? How are you going to develop the schedule? What are the tools and techniques you may utilize? For example, for developing schedule, a lot of techniques available. Schedule network analysis, critical path method, critical chain method, resource leveling, resource smoothing, schedule compression techniques like crashing, fast tracking. There are many techniques available. You may use all of the techniques or you may use combination of the techniques to come up with your project schedule. That's what we are thinking. And documenting under our schedule management plan. Yeah.
So you don't want to hear about the phases because this you know this one. You never create the phases, you know, determine the phases.
Phase, no. Phase is already decided here. Whether you are going to do it as a single project or you are breaking into various phases, whether you are using the predictive life cycle approach, agile approach, or hybrid approach, all are thought of here itself. Clear? This is the first stage of thinking about the schedule management, thinking about planning only. Okay. So we have the schedule management. The next, define activities. What do you mean define activities? What should be our next step of the planning? Defining. What is my define activities? Now, in the WBS process, what we did? We break down the scope into deliverables. What is the lowest level of the WBS? Work package. Meaning it is a deliverable. It could be a single deliverable, it could be multiple deliverables, right? So what should be our next level of thinking? What all the activities we need to perform in achieving these deliverables? What are the activities and actions we need to perform in producing this deliverable? That's what our next level of thinking. That is called defined activities. So what you are going to do? You are going to apply again the same technique what we did in the WBS. You are going to take the deliverable, break them into activities. So the technique name is called decomposition. What's the technique name? Decomposition. What's the technique? It's a general management technique. Whenever things are bigger, you don't try to keep them in bigger and manage. You try to break them into smaller components, easy for you to manage. The same principle. So we are taking the deliverable, we are breaking down the deliverables into activities. So what are the activities to be carried out in producing each deliverable? That's called defined activity. So what is the result? Activity list. What is the result? Activity list. You are listing out the activities to be performed for each deliverable. That's all. This is first result. Second result, activity attributes. What's the second result? Activity attributes. What do you mean by activity attributes? Attributes. What is the activity attributes? You must express the characteristics of the activity. For example, you said excavation is one of the activities. What is excavation? Digging the ground. That's called excavation, right? But the excavation could be in sandy soil, or it could be hard soil, or it could be rocky soil, or it should be loose soil. Right? So you must define what is the nature of excavation. Because your resource determination, duration determination, sequence determination, all are depends on the nature of the activity. So you must define the characteristics of the activity. That's called activity attributes. The third result from this process is called milestone list. Milestone list. What is milestone? Milestone list. That is our third result. What is milestone? We talk about this terminology every day. Milestone. What is that? Target date achievements. Okay. Target date could be anything. Like your schedule also, you have the target date. Key activities or key deliverables completion or key deliverables commencement could be set as a milestone. Why do we need that? For example, I have a 40-story building. I need to complete the building in 3 years. So I must set my schedule goals. Substructure should be completed in 1 year. Superstructure should be completed in 1 year. MEP work should be completed in 10 months. Architectural work should be completed in 10 months. I may set the goals so that I can track the progress of these goals in order to achieve the project completion in 3 years. So the milestones helps us in setting the schedule goals and tracking the progress. But milestone does not have duration. Either it represents a commencement date of a key deliverable or completion date of a key deliverable. There's no duration for the milestone. You say, for example, you said substation should be completed by this date. Substructure should be completed by this date. Superstructure should be completed by this date. That's the way you say. Or completion. The start of commencement of the substation should be this date. Say, for example, I said structural completion end of 2024. Structural completion date is milestone is end of 2024. So am I going to sleep until end of 2024 to see whether I'm achieving this milestone? No. I will also set interim milestone. 10th floor must be complete on this date. 20th floor must be complete on this date. 30th floor must be complete. So I track the progress in order to make sure the structural completion by end of 2024. So the milestones helps us in setting the schedule goals and tracking the progress. But why it is a result in this process? When you list out all the activities, essential for producing all the deliverables. You can able to pick the milestone activities and set it as a milestone list. Clear? These are the result of this process. The next is sequencing of project activities. Sequencing of project activities. What do you mean by sequence? Relationship between the activities need to be analyzed. Say, for example, I have 20 activities in a deliverable. I have to perform 20 activities to produce a deliverable. Am I going to carry out all the 20 activities same time? Is it logical? No. So we need to determine what is the logical way of doing these activities in order to produce this deliverable. That's called sequencing of work. So how can we do that? For that, we need to understand what is the dependency between the activities. What are the dependencies between the activities? There are three types of dependency we could discuss. One is mandatory dependency, discretionary dependency, and external dependency. What is mandatory dependency? It is called hard logic, meaning it must be done only in that manner. Say, for example, are we able to construct the building without foundation? Are you able to construct the building without foundation? No. So you must construct the building foundation first before you constructing a building. It must be done only in this manner. It is due to the natural order of the activity. That's called mandatory dependency or hard logic. Hard logic. Secondly, discretionary dependency. It is called soft logic or preferred logic or preferential logic. Simplest example to understand. Say, for example, you want to paint this building. What is the sequence you adopt for painting work normally? You will put a group of painters. They go and start the primer first. So they go and do the primer throughout the building. It takes 1 month. And then they come back to the same point again. They will start the first coat of paint. And then they go and do the first coat of paint throughout the building. It takes another 1 month. They come back to the same point again and do the final coat. That takes another 1 month.